All right, ladies and gentlemen, our story of the week is called Laugh. It's found in your textbooks on page 511. If you do not have your textbook, you can find your textbook in Think Central, just like you could find your math book in Think Central. You do not have to listen to the reading. You are just responsible for reading the story. So if you want to listen, then watch this YouTube. If you want to just read it yourself, that is fine as well. You can find it on page 511. The genre of the story is science fiction. So it's writing based on scientific ideas, often set in the future. We are looking for technology of the future, unrealistic events, things that have not really happened in life up until this point that we know of, and characters that may or may not be like real people. Science fiction is fun. It's very entertaining stuff to read because there are all the possibilities in the world on where the story can go. All right. On page 511, it says, imagine the possibilities. Did you know that science fiction writers have been thrilling audiences with stories about time travel for over a century? One of the best known novels about time travel is H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. This novel featured a main character who builds an incredible time machine and uses it to explore and interact with periods and people far into the future. It was written back in 1888. Readers throughout the world have had a long-standing love affair with science fiction because it stimulates their imagination and weaves together elements of fantasy, science, adventure, mystery, and drama. Several popular science fiction authors have seen their work adapted into movies or television series that involve the creation of elaborate sets and futuristic inventions. And while translating a writer's vision of time travel to film or screen, it can be difficult and expensive, but the payoff is that fans of the book get to see the future of the past brought to life in a whole new ways. Despite the countless depiction of time travel in literature, film, and television, there's no evidence that it ever happened or could happen. It is a testament to the talent of science fiction authors that they are able to write such believable stories about a future that no one has experienced yet. Perhaps some of the inventions and environments and ideas in those stories will be realized someday, though. Imagine that. Okay. Page 512. Here we go. In movies, geniuses, they got frizzy white hair, right? They wear thick gold glasses and have names like Dr. Weinstein. Peter Lou did not have frizzy white hair. He had straight hair, as black as licorice. He didn't wear thick glasses either, since, well, his vision's normal. Peter's family, like ours, had immigrated from China, but they had settled here first. When we moved into a house just 2 doors down from the Lou's, they gave us some good advice on how to get along in America. I went to the same school as Peter. We walked to the school bus together every morning, and like many Chinese parents, mine made sure that I worked very hard in school. In spite of all I could do, my grades were nothing compared to Peter's. He was the top of our class. He was at the top in all of his classes. We walked to the school bus without talking because, well, I was a little scared of him. Besides, he was always deep in thought. Peter didn't have any friends. Most of the kids thought he was a nerd because they saw his head always buried in books. Now, I didn't think that he even tried to join the rest of us or cared what the others thought of him. And then he surprised us all. As I went down the block, trick-or-treating, dressed as a zucchini in my green sweats, I heard this strange, deep voice behind me say, "How do you do?" I yelped. I turned around. Peter was wearing this long black Chinese gown with slits in the sides. On his head, he had like a little round cap, and down each side of his mouth drooped a thin, long mustache. "I am Dr. Lu Manchu, the mad scientist," he announced, putting his hands in his sleeves and bowing. He smiled when he saw me staring at his costume. It was a scary smile somehow. Some of the other kids came up when they saw Peter and they were impressed. Hey, neat, said one boy. I hadn't expected Peter to put on a costume and go trick-or-treating like a normal kid. So maybe he did want to join the others after all, at least some of the time. After that night, he wasn't a nerd anymore. He was Dr. Lou Manchu. Even some of the teachers began to call him that. And when we became too old for trick-or-treating, Peter was still Dr. Lou Manchu. And now the rumor was that he was working on a fantastic machine in his parents' garage. But no one had any idea what it was. So one evening, as I was coming home from a babysitting job, I cut across the Lou's backyard, passing their garage, and I saw through a little window that the light was on. So my curiosity, well, it got the better of me, and I peeked in. I saw a booth. It looked like a shower stall. You know, a stool stood in the middle of the stall, and hanging over the stool was something that looked like a great big shower head. Suddenly, this deep voice behind me said, "Good evening, Angela." Peter bowed and smiled a scary smile. He didn't have his costume on. He didn't have the long droopy mustache, but he was Dr. Lou Manchu. "What are you doing?" I squeaked. Still in a strange, deep voice, Peter said, "What are you doing? After all, this is my garage." I was just cutting across your yard to get home. Your parents never complained before. "I thought you were spying on me," said Peter. "I thought you wanted to know about my machine." And he hissed when he said the word machine. Honestly, he was beginning to frighten me. "What machine?" I demanded. "You mean the shower stall thing?" He drew himself up. He narrowed his eyes, making them into slits. "This is my time machine." I goggled at him. You mean this machine can send you forward and backwards in time?" "Actually, I can only send things forward in time," admitted Peter, speaking in his normal voice again. "That's why I'm calling the machine LAFFF. It stands for Lou's Artificial for Fast Forward, or Artifact for Fast Forward." Of course, Peter always won first prize at the annual statewide science fair, but it's a long way from making a time machine. Minus his mustache and long Chinese gown, he was just Peter Lou. "I don't believe it," I said. "I bet LAFFF is only good for a laugh." "Okay, Angela, I show you," hissed Peter. He sat down on the stool and he twisted a dial, and I heard some bleeps and cheeps and gurgles. Then Peter disappeared. He must have done it with a mirror. As I looked around the garage, I peeked under the tool bench, but there was no sign of him. "All right, I give up," I told him. "It's a good trick, Peter. Come out now." Beep, clip, clunk, gurgle went the machine, and there was Peter, sitting on the stool. He held a red rose in his hand. "What do you think of that?" I blinked. "So you produced a flower? Maybe you had it under the stool." "Roses bloom in June, right?" he demanded. And that was true. And this was December. "I sent myself forward in time to June when the flowers were blooming," said Peter. "I picked the rose from our yard." "Convinced, Angela?" "It's too hard to swallow. You said you couldn't send things back in time," I objected. "So how'd you bring the rose back?" Even as I spoke, I saw his hands were empty. The rose was gone. "That's one of the problems with the machine," said Peter. When I send myself forward, I can't seem to stay there for long. I snap back to my own time after only a minute. Anything I bring with me snaps back to its own time too. So my rose was gone back to this June." I was finally convinced, and I began to see the possibilities. Wow, just think, if I don't want to do the dishes, I can set myself forward to the time when the dishes are already done. "No, that won't do you much good," said Peter. "You'd soon pop back to the time when the dishes were still dirty." Too bad. There must be something a machine is good for," I said. And then I had another idea. "Hey, can you bring me back a piece of fudge from the future, I can eat it twice, once now and once again in the future. Yes, but the fudge won't stay in your stomach, said Peter. It'd go back to the future. That's even better, I said. I can enjoy eating the fudge over and over and over again without getting fat. It was late. I had to go home before my parents started to worry. Before I left, Peter said, Look, Angela, there's still a lot of work to do on LAFFF. Please do not tell anybody about the machine until I got it right. A few days later, I asked him how he was doing. I can stay in the future a little bit longer now, he said. Once I got up to 4 minutes. Is that enough time to bring me back some fudge from the future? I asked. We don't keep many sweets around the house, he said, but I'll see what I can do. A few minutes later, he came back with a spring roll for me. My mother was frying these in the kitchen, and I snatched one while she wasn't looking. I bit into the hot, crunchy spring oil, but before I finished chewing, it disappeared. The taste of soy sauce, green onions, bean sprouts stayed a little longer in my mouth, though. It was fun to play around with LAFFF, but it wasn't really useful. I didn't know what a great help it would actually turn out to be. Every year, our school held a writing contest, and the winning story for each grade got printed in our school magazine. I wanted desperately to win. I worked awfully hard in school, but my parents still thought I could do better. Winning the writing contest would show my parents that I was really good in something. And I love writing stories, and I have lots of ideas. But when I actually write them down, my stories never turn out as good as I thought. I just can't seem to find the right words because English isn't my first language. I got an honorable mention last year, but it wasn't the same as winning and showing my parents my name, Angela Tang, printed in the school magazine. The deadline for the contest was getting close, and I had a pile of stories written, but none of them looked like a winner. Then, the day before the deadline, boing, a brilliant idea hit me. I thought of Peter and his LAFFF machine. I rushed over to Lou's garage, and just as I had hoped, Peter was there tinkering around with his machine. Got this great idea for winning the story contest, I told him breathlessly. You see, to be certain of winning, I have to write a story that would be the winner. Well, that's obvious, Peter said dryly. In fact, you're going around in a circle. Wait, listen, I said. I want to use LAFFF and go forward to the time when the next issue of the school magazine's out, and then I could read the winning story. After a moment, Peter nodded. I see. You plan to write down the winning story after you read it and then send it in for the contest? I nodded eagerly. The story would have to win because it was the winner. Peter began to look interested. I got LAFFF to the point where I can stay in the future for 7 minutes now. Will that be long enough for you? Well, I'll just have to work quickly, I said. Peter smiled. It wasn't a scary Lou Manchu smile, but it was a nice smile. He was getting as excited as I was. Okay, Angela, let's go for it. He led me to the stool. What's your destination, he asked. When's your destination? Suddenly I was nervous. I told myself that Peter had many, many time trips, and he looked perfectly healthy. Why not? What have I got to lose except for time? I took a deep breath. I want to go forward 3 weeks in time. By then I'd have a copy of the new school magazine in my room. Ready, Angela? Asked Peter. As ready as I'll ever be, I whispered. Bleep, cheep, gurgle. For the record, that is called an onomatopoeia, right? Words that are sounds. Suddenly, Peter, he disappeared. What went wrong? Did Peter get sent by mistake instead of me? Oh, and then I realized what had happened. 3 weeks later in time, Peter might be somewhere else. No wonder I couldn't see him. There was no time to be lost. Rushing out of Peter's garage, I ran to our house and entered through the back door. My mother was in the kitchen. When she saw me, she just stared at me. Angela, I thought you were going upstairs taking a shower. Sorry, I panted. No time to talk. I dashed up to my room and then suddenly had a strange idea. What if I met myself in my room? It was a spooky thought. There was nobody in my room. Where was I? Where was I of 3 weeks later? Wait, Mother just said she thought I was taking a shower. Down the hall, I can hear the water running in the bathroom. All right, That meant that I wouldn't run into me for a while. I went to the shelf above my desk and frantically pawed through the junk pile there. I found it. I found the latest issue of the school magazine, the one with the winning stories printed in it. How much time had passed? I better hurry. The shower stopped running. That meant the other me was out of the bathroom. I gotta get out of here. Too late. Just as I started down the stairs, I heard Mother talking again. Angela? A minute ago you were all dressed. Now you're in your robe again and your hair's all wet? I just don't understand. I shivered. It was kind of scary listening to Mother talking to myself downstairs. I heard my other self answering something, and then the sound of her and my steps coming up the stairs. So in a panic, I dodged into the spare room and I closed the door. I heard the steps, my steps, go past and into my room. The minute I heard the door of my room close, I rushed out and down the stairs. Mother was standing at the front of the stairs. When she saw me, her mouth dropped. But, just a minute ago you were in your robe and your hair was all wet. See you later, Ma. I panted and I ran. Behind me, I heard my mother muttering, I'm going mad. I didn't stop and try to explain. I might go mad too. It'd be great if I could just keep the magazine with me, but like the spring roll, it will get carried back to its own time after a few minutes. So the next best thing was to read the magazine as fast as I could. It was hard to run and flip through the magazine at the same time, but I made it back to Peter's garage and I plopped down on the stool. At last, I found the story that had won the contest in our grade. I started to read, and then suddenly I heard bleep, sheep, gurgle. Peter loomed up in front of me. I was back in my original time again. But I still had the magazine. Now I had to read the story before the magazine popped back into the future. It was hard to concentrate with Peter jumping up and down impatiently, so different from his usual calm, collected self. I read a few paragraphs, and I was beginning to see how the story would shape up. But before I got any further, the magazine disappeared from my hand. So I didn't finish reading the story. I didn't reach to the end, where the name of the winning writer was printed. That night, I stayed up very late to write down what I remembered of the story. It had a neat plot, and I could see why it was the winner. I hadn't read the entire story, so I had to make up the ending myself. But that was okay, since I knew how it should come out. The winners of the writing contest would be announced at the school assembly on Friday. After we had filed into the assembly hall and sat down, the principal gave a speech. I tried not to fidget while he explained about the contest. Suddenly, I was struck by a dreadful thought. Somebody in my class had written the winning story. The one I copied. Wouldn't that person be declared the winner instead of me? The principal started announcing the winners. I chewed my knuckles in agony of suspense. As I waited to see who would be announced as the winner in my class, slowly, the principal began with the lowest grade. Each winner walked in slow motion to the stage while the principal slowly explained why the story was good. At last, he came to our grade. The winner is... He stopped, slowly got out a handkerchief, slowly blew his nose, then he cleared his throat. The winning story is Around and Around by Angela Tang. I sat like a stone, unable to move. Peter nudged me. Go on, Angela. They're waiting for you. I got up. I walked up to the stage in a daze. The principal's voice seemed to be coming from far, far away as he told the audience that I had written a science fiction story about time travel. The winners each got a notebook bound to imitation leather for writing more stories. Inside the cover of the notebook was a ballpoint pen, but the best prize was having my story in the school magazine with my name printed at the end. And why didn't I feel so good about winning? After the assembly, the kids in our class crowded around to congratulate me. Peter formally shook my hand. Good work, Angela, he said, and he winked at me. It didn't make me feel any better. I hadn't won the contest fairly. Instead of writing the story myself, I copied it from the school magazine. That meant someone else in our class, one of the kids here, actually wrote the story. Who was it? My heart was knocking against my ribs as I stood there and waited for someone to complain that I'd stolen the story. Nobody did. As we were riding the school bus home, Peter looked at me. You don't seem very happy, Angela, about winning the contest. No, I'm not, I mumbled. I feel just awful. Tell you what, suggested Peter. Come over to my house and we'll discuss it. What's there to discuss? I asked gloomily. I won the contest because I cheated. Come on over anyways. My mother bought a fresh package of humbao in Chinatown. I couldn't turn down that invitation. Humbao, or roll stuffed with barbecue pork, that's my favorite snack. Peter's mother came into the kitchen while we were munching, and he told her about the contest. Mrs. Liu looked pleased. I'm very glad, Angela. You have a terrific imagination and you deserve to win. I like Angela's stories, said Peter. They're original. It was the first compliment he had ever paid me, and I felt my face turning red. After Mrs. Liu left, Peter and I each had another humbao. But I was still miserable. I wish I'd never started this. I feel like a jerk. Peter looked at me, and I swear he was enjoying himself. If you stole another student's story, why didn't that person complain? I don't know, I wailed. Think, said Peter. You're smart, Angela. Come on, figure it out. Me smart. I was so overcome to hear myself called smart by a genius like Peter, I stared at him. He had to repeat himself. Figure it out, Angela. I tried to concentrate. Why was Peter looking so amused? The light finally dawned. Got it, I said slowly. I'm the one who wrote the story. The winning story is your own, Angela, because that's the one that won. My head began to go around and around. But where did the original idea from the story come from? What made the plot so good? Asked Peter. His voice sounded unsteady. Well, in my story, my character used a time machine to go forward in time. Okay, whose idea was it to use a time machine? It was mine, I said slowly. And I remember the moment when the idea had hit me with a boing. So you stole from yourself, sputtered Peter. He started to roar with laughter. I had never seen him break down like that. At this rate, he might wind up being human. When he could talk again, he asked me to read my story to him. I did, and I began. In movies, geniuses have frizzy white hair, right? They wear thick glasses, and they have names like Dr. Weinstein. Guys, see what happened there? Come on, figure it out. This story that we read was her story, and it goes around and around and around and around. I don't know. I like this one. I think it's a good one. All right, ladies and gents. We talked about onomatopoeias. Onomatopoeias are words that are sounds, right? Like crack, boom, bang. Point of view. Think about the story and think about what point of view it was written from. Remember, normally it's either a third person point of view or it's first person. This one, first person, right? It was all from Angela's point of view. She used words like I and me. All right, well done. I'm going to have a short Google Doc to kind of test your comprehension from the story that you guys can fill out by the end of the day.